For 11,000 years, the Galactic Assembly had survived by following one simple rule. No civilization was allowed to become too dangerous, too unpredictable, or too independent, and for most of those 11,000 years, humanity had never been considered a problem because Earth was regarded as a young, isolated world sitting at the edge of civilized space, a species with primitive ships, primitive weapons, primitive politics, and an embarrassing habit of asking questions nobody wanted answered. But everything changed when the Terran delegation entered the assembly chamber and discovered that every seat was occupied. Every major civilization had sent representatives, and the enormous silver walls were covered with the symbols of the galaxy's oldest powers. Earth had been summoned to answer charges of unauthorized military expansion, interference with protected worlds, possession of prohibited technology, refusal to submit to assembly inspections, and most seriously, the construction of a fleet beyond the limits assigned to a developing civilization. Yet the humans arrived without weapons, without escorts, and without fear, represented by Ambassador Elena Voss, who walked calmly to the center of the chamber while thousands of alien eyes watched her. And when the Supreme Chancellor asked whether humanity understood the seriousness of the accusations, Elena simply replied, "We understand that you've already made your decision." The chamber became silent because she was correct. The vote had already been scheduled before humanity arrived, and everyone knew the result. Earth would be exiled from the galactic community. The Chancellor raised one long crystalline hand and announced that humanity had violated too many treaties, rejected too many inspections, and demonstrated unacceptable aggression during the recent border conflict with the Karun Empire. A conflict the humans insisted had started when Karun warships entered Earth's territory and destroyed 3 civilian colonies. But the Assembly had accepted the Karun explanation that the colonies were strategically unfortunate losses, and that humanity's destruction of the invading fleet afterward had been excessive. Elena listened without interrupting as civilization after civilization spoke against Earth, calling humans unstable, militaristic, territorial, emotionally primitive, and dangerously resistant to authority. And then the final accusation came from the Karun representative himself, a towering armored creature whose voice shook the chamber as he declared, "Humanity has proven that it cannot coexist peacefully with civilized species." Elena looked directly at him and asked, "Is that your final statement?" The Karun representative smiled. "It is," Elena nodded once. "Good," the Chancellor frowned. "Good? Yes," Elena replied. "Because now we know." The Assembly didn't understand what she meant, but the vote proceeded. 193 civilizations voted for exile. 7 abstained. 4 voted against. Earth was officially expelled from the galactic community effective immediately. All human diplomatic privileges were revoked. Terran vessels were ordered to leave recognized space within 30 standard days. Earth's trade agreements were terminated, and any human military presence outside the Sol system would be considered hostile. The Chancellor delivered the final sentence with satisfaction. Humanity has 30 days to withdraw beyond the recognized galactic frontier. Elena stood perfectly still. Then she smiled. Not an angry smile, not a nervous smile, a strangely peaceful smile. 30 days? She asked. No, the Chancellor answered. 30 days, Elena nodded. Then I believe we are finished here. She turned and walked away. The Assembly expected protests. They expected threats. They expected humans to beg for reconsideration, because every civilization that had ever been exiled had done exactly that. But humanity did none of those things. Earth didn't appeal the decision. Earth didn't demand another vote. Earth didn't send angry transmissions. Instead, 3 hours after the vote, every human embassy in civilized space quietly shut down. 6 hours later, every Terran merchant ship began returning towards Sol. 12 hours later, human research stations disappeared from Assembly territory. 24 hours later, something strange happened. Every human military vessel stationed outside Sol vanished from every known sensor network. The galaxy assumed they had begun retreating. The Karun celebrated. Galactic media declared that humanity had finally been humbled. Several civilizations congratulated themselves for preventing another dangerous species from destabilizing the galaxy. Nobody realized that the humans weren't retreating. They were going home. On Earth, President Mara Voss addressed humanity from the United Nations orbital platform, and billions watched as she stood before a simple black screen. Today, she said, the Galactic Assembly voted to exile Earth. The world waited for outrage. Instead, she continued calmly. They have ordered humanity beyond their borders. She paused. We will comply. Confusion spread across the planet. Then she smiled. But they misunderstood something very important. We have never needed their borders. Behind her, the screen changed, revealing something the galaxy had never seen. A map of the Milky Way covered with thousands of tiny red points. The points weren't colonies. They weren't military bases. They weren't trade stations. They were human installations. Secret installations, hidden for decades. Some were buried beneath moons. Others drifted between stars. Some were inside asteroid fields disguised as dead rocks. Others were located beyond regions considered impossible to reach. And there were thousands of them. President Voss continued, for the last 83 years, humanity has known that the Galactic Assembly would eventually attempt to control us. The room became silent. We knew because the Assembly doesn't tolerate independent civilizations. We studied their history. We studied their wars. We studied every species they had sanctioned, restricted, isolated, or erased. The map expanded. So while they were measuring our fleet, we built another one. The galaxy had believed Earth's military consisted of a few hundred outdated warships. That was the first lie. Humanity actually possessed 32,000 combat vessels. But even that was not the real secret. The real secret was that humanity had spent decades learning from every civilization, willing to trade technology with them, secretly acquiring propulsion systems, shield technology, quantum communications, artificial intelligence, energy weapons, stealth systems, and materials the Assembly had declared restricted. But humans hadn't simply copied alien technology. They had combined it with their own engineering philosophy, creating machines the galaxy had never imagined. The largest human vessel, the Titan-class dreadnought, was 3 kilometers long and carried enough energy to destroy a small moon. Yet the galaxy had never detected one because humanity had never deployed them in civilized space. They had been waiting beyond the frontier, waiting for the moment Earth no longer needed permission. The Assembly's 30-day deadline became irrelevant because humanity had already completed its withdrawal within 36 hours. Every human citizen outside Sol returned home or crossed beyond the recognized frontier. Then, on the second day, Earth transmitted a single message to the Galactic Assembly. Thank you for the clarification. The Chancellor laughed when he heard it. The Karun ambassador called it a desperate attempt to save face. The galaxy moved on. But 3 days later, something appeared beyond the frontier, a human station. Then another. Then another. Soon thousands of enormous structures began emerging from hyperspace, forming a chain around the outer edge of recognized galactic territory. They weren't attacking. They weren't threatening anyone. They were simply there. The Assembly sent a warning. Terran vessels are prohibited from establishing military infrastructure within 50 light-years of civilized territory. Humanity responded with one sentence. This is no longer civilized territory. The Chancellor didn't understand. Then the human map was transmitted. The Assembly discovered that the region beyond their frontier contained hundreds of star systems that had never been claimed because they were considered economically useless, unstable, or too distant to govern. Humanity claimed them all, not through conquest but through settlement. Within weeks, construction began. Human cities appeared on frozen moons. Mining colonies rose on barren planets. Fusion reactors illuminated dead worlds. Agricultural stations transformed asteroids into gardens. Shipyards larger than anything the Assembly possessed began building vessels around stars nobody had cared about. The galaxy watched in disbelief as humanity built a civilization outside the civilization. The Karun Empire was the first to panic. They had believed Earth's exile made humanity vulnerable. Instead, it had removed every legal restriction preventing humans from developing weapons. The Karun demanded that the Assembly enforce the exile. The Assembly sent inspectors. The inspectors returned 6 hours later and reported that the human frontier was already protected by an automated defense network capable of tracking objects across dozens of light years. The Chancellor demanded that humanity dismantle it. Humanity refused. Then the Karun made their mistake. They launched a fleet toward the new Terran frontier. 200 warships entered the disputed region, expecting the humans to retreat. Instead, they encountered a single human vessel. It was an old-looking ship, barely 600 meters long with no visible weapons. The Karun commander laughed and ordered it to surrender. The human captain replied, "You are currently inside the territory of the Terran Union. Please turn around." The Karun commander refused. "This territory belongs to the galactic community." The human captain answered, "No, you gave it away." The Karun fleet continued forward. The human ship remained still. Then the stars behind it began to move. At first, the Karun believed their sensors were malfunctioning. Then they realized the stars weren't moving. Thousands of ships were emerging from hyperspace, hidden behind the distortion of the system itself. Titan-class dreadnoughts, carrier fleets, missile platforms, drone swarms, human battlecruisers. The Karun fleet was surrounded before it could even react. Their commander finally understood the truth. Earth had not been exiled into weakness. Earth had been exiled into freedom. He opened a channel. "We demand negotiations." The human captain answered, "You had negotiations. We are prepared to reconsider the situation. So are we. What do you want?" There was a pause. "Nothing." The Karun commander was confused. "Nothing? You wanted us gone. We're gone. Then why are you blocking us?" The human captain looked at the tactical display and replied, "Because you're trying to follow us." The Karun fleet withdrew. For the first time in centuries, the Karun Empire had retreated from a confrontation without firing a shot. The story spread across the galaxy, and suddenly every civilization began reconsidering the decision to exile Earth. But the Assembly refused to admit its mistake. The Chancellor declared that humanity was attempting to intimidate the galaxy. Humanity answered by doing something even more frightening: nothing. They stopped speaking to the Assembly entirely. They stopped negotiating. They stopped trading. They stopped asking for recognition. They simply built. 10 years passed. The Terran frontier expanded across hundreds of systems. 20 years passed. Human technology advanced beyond anything the Assembly could track. 30 years passed. Entire alien civilizations began voluntarily joining the Terran Union because humans offered something the Assembly never had: independence. There were no mandatory military quotas, no cultural restrictions, no inspections, no political loyalty tests. A civilization could join the Terran Union and remain itself. The Assembly watched its influence collapse as dozens of worlds abandoned it. Then came the event that changed everything. A massive alien threat emerged from beyond the galactic rim, a civilization known as the Vare, a species that had destroyed 17 star nations in less than a century. The Assembly activated its ancient defense protocols and called every member world to war. But the Assembly had a problem. Its military was designed for control, not survival. Its fleets were centralized. Its weapons were regulated. Its commanders required authorization from political councils. Its systems were vulnerable to the Vare's unconventional attacks. Within 6 months, the Vare destroyed 3 major Assembly fleets. Within a year, 27 worlds fell. The Assembly finally sent an emergency transmission to humanity. The message was simple: "We need your help." For several hours, there was no response. The Chancellor feared humanity would refuse. Instead, a human transmission arrived. "Coordinates?" The Chancellor stared at the screen. "You will help us?" The human commander replied, "You are being attacked." "After everything we did to you?" "That's irrelevant." "Why?" The human commander answered, "Because you're still human neighbors, even if you're terrible neighbors." The first Terran fleet arrived 2 days later. The Assembly expected thousands of ships. Instead, only 12 appeared. 12 human dreadnoughts entered the battlefield and destroyed an entire Vare assault fleet in 43 minutes. The Assembly was stunned. The human commander transmitted one final message: "We don't fight wars the way you do." Then the rest of the Terran fleet arrived. 20,000 ships emerged from hyperspace. The Vare had never faced anything like it. Humanity didn't simply overpower them. Humans adapted faster than the Vare could change tactics. Every defeat became a lesson. Every lesson became a weapon. Every weapon became obsolete within weeks because humans built something better. The war lasted 3 years. When it ended, the Vare surrendered to humanity, not the Assembly, and that was when the galaxy finally understood the greatest mistake it had made. The Galactic Assembly had believed humanity was dangerous because humans possessed weapons. That wasn't the truth. Humanity was dangerous because humans learned. They learned from enemies. They learned from failure. They learned from fear. They learned from history. And most importantly, they learned from rejection. The Assembly had tried to punish humanity by removing its place in the galaxy. Instead, it had removed the chains that kept humanity from becoming something greater. After the war, the Chancellor personally traveled to Earth and requested that humanity rejoin the galactic community. He expected conditions. He expected demands. Instead, President Maravos stood before him and asked one question. Why? The Chancellor looked confused. Because the galaxy needs Earth. Mara smiled sadly. No, the galaxy needed Earth when you were afraid of us. You didn't want us then. You wanted us obedient. The Chancellor lowered his head. We made a mistake. Yes, Mara said. You did. Can you forgive us? She looked through the window toward Earth, toward the planet the Assembly had once considered primitive, isolated, and insignificant. Forgiveness isn't the problem. Then what is? Mara turned back toward him. Trust. The Chancellor said nothing. Finally, Mara offered her hand. We won't return to the Galactic Assembly. The Chancellor's face fell. But we will build something better. Years later, historians would call the event the Great Exile, but humans called it something simpler, the day the galaxy set us free. Humanity never conquered the Galactic Assembly. It didn't need to. It simply grew beyond it. The galaxy eventually learned that exile was only punishment when the person being exiled had nowhere else to go. Earth had somewhere else to go. Humanity had always been looking toward the stars, and when the galaxy closed its doors, humans didn't knock harder. They built their own door. They built their own cities, their own alliances, their own fleets, their own future. And whenever young alien civilizations asked how humanity became the most influential power in the galaxy, the answer was always the same. They voted to exile us. Then the storyteller would smile and add, and humanity didn't wait to be told twice.